Welcome back to the channel. This game continues the Commonwealth Championship played in London in 1985. This is the 9th round game, and Nigel's opponent was Paul Littlewood, and I am from England. The game started as a raw López. And the close variation. Black hits the pawn on b5. White hits the pawn on b5. This is all standard stuff. White strikes in the centre. And slightly unusual move from Nigel, Queen e2, normally more normal. And Queen e2 here. This does allow the knight to go to d7 and potentially into c5. But Black chooses to put his queen on d7. A bit of an odd choice. Whereas the black knight on b8 has got no squares now. White continues to put pressure on the b5 pawn. And here Nigel decides to take on c6. An interesting idea would have been knight to h4 and getting a very nice post for his knight. He plays to trade the pawn on c6, and Black chooses to recapture with the knight. The best move, but does give up the pawn on b5 once all the exchanges happen. And the knight drops back to hit the b pawn along with the queen on d7. White defends it. And a slightly odd move from Littlewood, moving his knight to c8. I think rook to b8, putting more pressure on the b pawn and eventually threatening to capture it by moving the bishop with a better option. The bishop drops out of the way of knight to b6, which is duly played anyway. And Nigel chooses to reroute his knight to c3. And now we enter a period of the game where there's quite a lot of shuffling and manoeuvring of pieces. Queen to e6 kind of doesn't achieve much. Knight to a4, preventing knight to c3 might have been a better option. And again, Black seems to be shuffling his pieces. Knight to a4 again, trying to get rid of the good knight on c3 would have been a good option. He's obviously trying to hit into c5 at some point. Bishop actually develops. And another quite a curious move from Black, putting his queen into b3. It looks a nice square, but it's not achieving much. He's putting pressure on the b2 pawn, but it does give White a target to hit. Nigel defends the pawn, or over defends the pawn. And queen to b4, putting pressure maybe on the e pawn. But it's quite unclear as to what Black's trying to do here. Nigel decides to reroute his knight, probably to c2 to attack the queen with tempo. And the queen comes back to b3. Trade of bishop for knight. But one of the knights is going to end up on d5 square. g3 just giving the king some room, and potentially stopping any bishop h4s, and also looking to play h4 if the bishop does come out to g5, which it actually does. Knight retreats, hitting the queen, and now h4 to kick the bishop back again. So white's got a nice space advantage, still got the extra pawn, and in a very good position. His knights are very good. And black's pieces are a bit uncoordinated. The black bishop on d8 hasn't really got any good squares to go to. And the b7 bishop as well is sort of looking at the e pawn at the moment. So knight to e3 with a view to get a knight back into d5 again, or f5. Black prevents the knight to f5. The trade of pawns. And rook to d1, centralising the rook. Black does the same. And the bishop drops back to give the rook some more scope. And potentially can get onto the a2, g8 diagonal. Bishop returns to g5 again. And this time the knight does hop into d5. And white chooses to put the pawn on d5. It gives a lovely square for the knight on e4. And here black offers a trade of queens, which seems like a good idea, but misses white's next move, which is queen to c2, which puts a massive pressure on the g6 square, and it's not easy how black can defend it. Maybe when instead of queen to c4 offering the trade, he could have gone to queen to c7 and then could have defended the pawn with queen to f7. He chooses a way to give up a pawn, but now white's two pawns up, and he's got a very strong knight. Black does have the bishop pair, and white's pawn structure is still quite loose. The only move to defend the d pawn. And here the bishop comes out to the a2 diagonal, overprotecting the d5 square, so the rook can move. A natural advance by black. And here Nigel decides to try and trade the rooks. I think rook to b1 would have been slightly more accurate, but this seems quite normal. Black tries to keep the rooks on the board. And then plays bishop to c8, which doesn't seem to... not sure where the bishop's heading to, maybe to f5. Maybe h5 would have been better to sort of try and clamp down on the position a bit. Sorry. Looks to decentralising the rook. The bishop does come out to f5. And b6. White decides to push the b. The rook has to come back to defend it. The white gets behind it. And here, I think Nigel makes a mistake. Knight to c3. And as we see in the game, it doesn't look a bad move. I think bishop to b1 would have been better defending the knight. But the main idea is to stop the bishop coming to d3 and a6 to get back round and help defend the b pawn. Hitting the b pawn, which has to advance. But now, as I said, bishop to d3 is a good idea to get the bishop back to help attack the b pawn. Nigel blocks it, but whichever way you trade the bishop, he's going to lose the b pawn. Black chooses to trade the black bishop instead of the white bishop, and now has regained the pawn, or one of the pawns. So he's got rid of the dangerous b7 pawn, but he's obviously white still has a pass b pawn, and he's still winning. But now it's a little less clear as to the result. The rook corrects the bishop, and now decides to push the pawn. And here I think this is another mistake from black, which Nigel doesn't actually punish. I think this is an unnecessary move. I think he needs to get his king into the centre quickly, same as white, and something along these lines would have been okay for black. He's still losing, but he's back in the game, and his king's really active now. He played bishop d7, and I think here Nigel missed the trick. He played knight to d1. Again, he's looking to reroute his knight, but I think the king needs to be in the centre, and the king needs to get active. And once he gets his king active, I think his job's going to be a lot easier to push the people home. So we get king to f6, which is the move he should have played the move before, but now it's the tempo. f4 trying to stop the advance of the king, and black hits the chain. So after the trade of the pawns, the kings managed to get into e5. Finally, the white king moves forward. And black sets up a blockade. So now I think the position, even though there's an extra pawn on the board, it's very difficult for white to win the game now. It's difficult to see how he's going to make progress. Now he's going to try and trade off another pawn. And I think if white takes the pawn now, I think the rooks get traded, and I think the game will end up in a draw. So to keep his winning chances, Nigel pushes forward, allowing h3, and there is to scramble to defend each pawn. And obviously now black can go after the b pawn. The knight checks, and the king has to retreat, and can't go to e7. I think that would have been a move after. Something like this, I think it's going to be very hard to stop the g pawn. So he goes to g7, the pawns is duly exchanged. Rook to a2, obviously threatening rook to a7, pinning and winning the bishop. King sidesteps. The rook standard idea in the endgame, trying to get behind the position. And this is probably the losing move. This allows white to pin the bishop, gaining the tempo, which is all he needs to get his pieces in. The king has to drop back to defend, and now g5. And the pawn's just going to start rolling. Bishop to a4, trying to get the bishop back round, unpinning the knight. And now the d pawn drops. King to f8, trying to get over to the pawn. White checks. Comes back to hit the bishop. And the knight blocks the rook coming across. Bishop comes back, pinning the pawn, but white can simply push forward. You can't take it with the knight or the bishop because the d7 is going to just win the game. Plays bishop to e6. King to d4 now, the king's coming in. Hits the g pawn. White attacks the bishop. And then knight to e5, blocking the attack on the g or the threatening d7. Black tries to get behind the position, and d7 played. Rook to d1, check, but now white can block the knight. And black must give up the bishop. To g1, rook to d5, defending the pawn. And it's now just a matter of technique with an extra knight and a pawn. And in this position, after a long struggle, Littlewood resigned. A game that was in the balance for quite a long time. White was winning, then allowed black back into the game, and should have been a drawn game. And then Littlewood make a bad mistake with the king to f7, just allowing that one extra tempo to allow white to get into the game, get into the position. So a good game from Nigel. He moved further up the board, the leaderboard, and was going well, but he was still behind the lead. I I think this is the last decisive game he played in the tournament. It was a couple of more draws, and he ended up, I think, coming second or third, equal. But I might cover the other games without commentary and put up a cross table in the next video. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And until next time, bye for now.